Hello, Malik Currington here, Family Budget Fisherman. Thank you for tuning in to this very special episode. As you saw in the thumbnail and in the description below the thumbnail, the title rather, below the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about, for the beginner, five categories of baits that you should have. Part of the reason for this beginner series, this is the third iteration or video in this beginner series, and it's simply to take the big monstrous industry that we call the fishing industry and make it palatable for you, so that for those of you who are beginners, you have direction to begin your eventual passion in fishing. And of course, as you all know, I'm a multi-species fisherman, so I'm going to be coming from the bass, crappie, bluegill, shellcracker, red ear. Those three I always just kind of put together, even though species-wise I know that they're separate, as well as catfish, striper, trout, salmon. Okay, that's about all I fish for. And that's just because we don't have white bass and and yellow perch and all that here. If we did, I would fish for that as well. So having said all that, what I'm going to be sharing with you, these baits you can fish in any water in the United States, from Alaska to the freshwater lakes they have in Hawaii, to any of the contiguous 48 states and territories, at any time of the year, winter, spring, summer, or fall, at any time of the day or night, and catch fish, depending on whether or not you can endure whatever the outdoor temperature is to the level of your safety. So some cases it's going to take a lot longer. You're going to get very few bites, and then there's some others you're going to be just going through baits, bait after bait after bait. But nevertheless, in my view, these five categories, there's no specialty to them. They are all workhorses in the areas that they are. And we try to keep it that simple because we want for you to catch, I want for you. And when I say we, me, the subscribers to this channel, your family, your friends who are interested in supporting you in this effort, that collective we would like for you to be as successful as possible. And in order to take it serious, these five baits are integral for you to, number one, catch fish. Number two, build confidence in your ability to catch fish. And then number three, develop a style of your own, which will allow for you to get into some other areas. Now, there are going to be a couple baits. I'm going to be very specific as to either the title or the brand. And then in one particular case, I'm going to be very specific as to the customization. In general, I am completely against customizing baits for beginners. But there's one particular case where that will be necessary in order for you to do your best with this type of bait. So without further ado, we got five categories. And I think these are all fun categories. As a matter of fact, I am going to do one of the first fishing shows. I don't know if it's going to be the first, but it will be in the range of the first five, where I'm going to only use baits from these five categories. I'm going to get out there and catch some fish. You watch and see. So what we have here, category one is bladed baits. Bladed baits. And it's a big category because of the type of bladed baits that you have. What I have here are spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, inline spinners, and underspins. Okay, I have those four types of baits in the category called bladed baits. And yes, you will need to get at least one of each one of those subcategories. By the way, as a budget, set aside for yourself $50 to get all the baits that I'm talking about, not the specific kinds of baits I have here, because I got a lot more money than that sitting on this table beneath the vision of the camera, the view of the camera. However, take into consideration any sales and discounts that you'll get, your out-of-pocket expense should not go above $50. Okay? Now, so the very first one is the spinnerbait. Every beginning fisherman needs a spinnerbait, and you're going to need it in one of two sizes. If you have the money, get them both, or if the deal works, get them both. If not, get one. The 3/8 ounce. For what it's worth, the 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, double bladed, whether it's double willow in Colorado, whatever the combination, the double bladed 3/8 ounce spinnerbait is the most common spinnerbait thrown today. And it is the most reasonably priced among all the types of spinnerbaits that there are. The brand, because you are a beginner, I would recommend that you choose a popular brand like ZMan, for example. It could be Guggen, it could be Terminator, it could be Booyah. Pick a brand and go with that brand for a little while. If you're confident enough, you can go with a house brand, or what it's actually called private label. But it's the house brand of, in this case, Dick's Sporting Goods. And they all have one. Shields has a house brand. Academy has a house brand. Sportsman's Warehouse has a house brand. If I didn't say Shields has a house brand. They all do. And this happens to be the house brand for Bass Pro Shops has a house brand. Bass Pro Shops / Cabela's has a house brand. And my favorite color happens to be Sexy Shad, which is why you see these two here. This is the 3/8 ounce. The second size that you should get is the 1/4 ounce. So if you can get both of those baits, that's fine. But if not, get the 3/8 ounce. You're going to encounter more opportunities to throw the 3/8 ounce than you will the 1/4 ounce. That said, if you can only get the 1/4 ounce, get it. But don't go beyond 3/8 ounce and 1/4 ounce. And don't get a lot of them. Just get 2 or 3 of them if you can. But stick within a $50 budget. That's my recommendation. I think I'm going to be doing these once a year, and I'm going to move them from late April up to February. And the reason is this, because I've noticed how much technology changes from year to year. The rods, the reels, the equipment, the accessories, all that changes so much that it will be important to do a new beginner series every year. And then after the spring, between spring and summer, do an intermediate series. And then during the fall, do a master's course, which it will include a specialty on winter fishing, winter and night fishing. Okay? So just to let you know about that. So the next one, it's actually a jig. Okay? Again, this is ZMan. This is the ZMan original chatterbait. I recommend the ZMan original chatterbait. Don't go to any other brand. If you're a beginner, start here. Don't even start off with other brands that you've seen before. And the reason why is this. You'll never know what a chatterbait is supposed to do until you throw one of these original chatterbaits. Not even the jackhammer. The jackhammer is the most expensive chatterbait, I think, on the market. In terms of a general category of baits. Chatterbaits. The ZMan original chatterbait doesn't throw the same way. But you don't need that level of specialty right now. So stick with the original chatterbait, which is actually a jig with a blade on it. 3/8 ounce, recommended. Try not to do the 1/4 ounce. As much as I would love to tell you the 1/4 ounce, try not to do the 1/4 or the 1/8. Stick with the 3/8 ounce. The reason why is because you'll have more opportunities to throw the 3/8 ounce than you will the smaller sizes. Okay. Now, this, I'm telling you, this is the brand. Okay. Now, once you become acquainted, you can go to Strike King, you can go to Booyah, you can go to Berkeley, you can go to Guggen, Picasso. You could just have at it with the different types. But that should always be your beginning when we're talking about chatterbaits. Now, the next one in that category is the underspin. Now, I have two, and these are the private label brand of underspins. And I happen to like these. These work quite well for me. And they have one other. I happen to have on this table a VMC, which is a 3/8 ounce. I do not recommend a 3/8 ounce underspin because the type of fishing that you will be doing, this will be probably a bit much. Stick with the 3/16 or the 1/4 ounce. 3/16 or the 1/4 ounce. The color of the head, if you stay between white, chartreuse, brown, black, silver, it doesn't matter, or gold, it really doesn't matter. I mean, there might be times when it will, but as a beginner, it really doesn't matter, because where you're going to be throwing these, you may have certain types of pressure, but your goal is to learn how to use these baits more than anything. And that goes for everything that I have here. You need to learn to use the baits first before you start getting finicky. But stay between white, chartreuse, brown, black, and silver and gold, and you'll be fine. Okay? So stay between, in terms of sizes, 3/16 and 1/4 ounces, the smaller sizes. Okay? Now, that goes for the underspins. And the last, and certainly not the least in this particular category, the subcategory of inline spinners. Now, I'm going to make a claim here, and I want to see if anybody can challenge me on this claim. The inline spinner, in whatever size it is, MEPS 5, MEPS 6, I got this one right here. This is an Eagle Claw, and this is another MEPS. I am challenging any person who's watching this video to tell me if there is another bladed bait that has caught more fish than the inline spinner. Period. That's my argument. This is the best performing bladed bait in fishing. Period. And I know I said that once already, and I'm going to say it a third time. Period. This bait catches a large variety of fish. Name a fish that chases minnows, and this will catch it. Of all shapes, sizes, colors, waters, rivers, I mean, just name it, and it will catch it. It is that much of a workhorse in the water. So please get you some inline spinners. Too many of us as fishermen have gotten away from the inline spinners because we're fascinated with a lot of the new stuff that comes out, especially those of us who have reached the master level of fishing, where I can go out and catch me, a 6-pound, 8-pound bass, 4-pound crappie, or even a 2-pound. A couple weeks ago, my brother, who I went fishing with down in Clear Lake is south of me, so down in Clear Lake, he caught a 2-pound red ear. It was a little over 2 pounds. It was huge. And he caught it. We were fishing for crappie, and he caught it on a crappie jig. So I say all that to say they would have chased this as well. Even as a fish that is generally much smaller than that, bluegill, red ear, shell cracker, I'm going to add into that yellow perch, and some of the other smaller forages like that. You don't get big unless you're eating at least one or two things, and most likely both. Minnows and crawdads. Okay, with very few exceptions. Minnows and crawdads make a fish big. Okay, that takes you from being a nice, healthy fish to being on the front cover of Mr. and Mrs. Olympian as a fish. So, just throwing it out there. All right, so our next category of baits, we're moving from the bladed baits. Now we're going to move very quickly into the jig baits. Now, mind you, I already told you that the chatterbait is a jig with a blade on it. So we're going to deal with a couple of jig skirts. These are the 2-ounce jig skirt. I got them in 2 colors here, and I probably should have put a dark color on here too, but more opportunities will happen with the lighter colors than the darker colors when it comes to curly tails. Chartreuse, in terms of a jig, a 2-inch jig, this is probably number 1 or number 2, depending on your region to fish. This is the number 1 or number 2 color. You might have some smaller pockets where it's different, where you got white and orange and other colors, but here we go. The 2-inch, and this is Berkeley's version of it, Power Bait, and these are 2-inch baits. This is a private label, Bass Pro Shops, called the Crappie Max. I recommend it. This is actually this is 2-inch even, and this is also 2-inch even. Okay, I recommend these because when you get into small baits, just like large baits, when you get into small baits, you get into specialty fishing. And right now we're trying to get you used to fishing and catching fish. And the 2-inch you will enjoy more success with a 2-inch curly tail. As a matter of fact, you could take this 2-inch curly tail and pair it with this underspin, and you can have a dynamic bait there. That curly tail will not mess up the action of that underspin. There are any number of crappie baits that we throw that have that exact profile, that are smaller with that exact profile. We've been throwing them for decades. It will not ruin the action of the underspin. Okay. Now, so that's our second category right there. Our third category, we're going to go into some hard baits. And there are 3 subcategories of hard baits, and you got to get one from each one, okay? The very first one, we're going to start off because there are, generally speaking, when we approach water, we approach fishing water to fish 3 different levels. Top of the water, the mid-level, and then the bottom. That's generally how we, approach fishing and breaking down water. So, top water. Because of what I'm going to recommend to you when we talk about terminal tackle in another video, I'm going to say this to you about this particular top water. This is called a popper. In my view, the popper is probably the easiest top water bait to throw. It is not a specialty. You don't have to only have it in certain conditions. This probably is the most diverse style of top water bait. Second behind it is the little torpedo. It has little propellers on it. In my view, I'm willing to watch and read the comments below for any argument that you may have that competes with mine. And number 1 is because the top water, the popper, as a top water bait, when you do it, when you handle it as an amateur, you will handle it correctly. Most amateurs will tend to snatch on their rods in order to make a bait move. Guess what? That's exactly what you need to do with this rod. And it doesn't take a lot of muscle memory, a lot of high-mindedness in order to remember to do that. You pop it. And you can pop it in a cadence. Pop, 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 pop. And in each case, generally speaking, you wait for the rings to dissipate. And you mix up your cadence. It'll be 3-1-2, 2-1-3, 1-2-3, 3-2-1. Each one of those cases, let the rings dissipate. The only time you might not need to wait for the rings to dissipate is if you're throwing it into an active top water bite where every time it hits the water, something's coming after it. But generally speaking, there's a cadence there that you kind of follow. It's almost a jerkbait cadence as well. But you're not watching for rings to dissipate, you're counting. So the popper as a topwater bait, excellent bait to choose. The beauty of this bait here is that whether you're using braided line, which I don't recommend for beginners, fluorocarbon, which I don't recommend for beginners, or monofilament, which I do recommend for beginners, that it will not ruin the action of this bait. A lot of times, especially with sinking lines, it will interfere with the best action for a topwater bait, not with the popper, because you want that popper to pop and pop back up, pop down, pop back up, or pop across, pop back up, and create noise. So that's your topwater bait. The second one is the mid-range, and we're going to take a look at 3 different baits for that. Now, I'm showing you 3 different multiple styles of baits because there's going to be someone who watches this video and they're going to look at exactly the brands and try to go get those brands. I recommend that you look at the style more than the brand and look at what attracts you. Now, if you're willing to pay $10, I think this is a $10 bait, that's fine. But I would prefer that you not to, get something a little less expensive. Go for a $6 bait or a $4 bait. And there are some out there. But I'm showing you this because I'm using the best example of what I'm talking about. So in this particular case, I have, and that goes for everything that I'm showing you so far, not just this particular bait. This is a sixth sense medium diving bait. It dives 4 to 8 feet, and that is considered mid to lower range for a beginner. If you have deeper water, it's going to be more mid-range. If you have shallow water, this is going to be more toward the lower range, but 4 to 8 feet. And by the way, let me interject here. For most fishing, as a beginner, I encourage you to stay within the first 10 feet of the water column, with 10 feet being your maximum depth, unless there's a reason that the water itself is 13, 14, 15 feet. I know in Clear Lake, down in Clear Lake, there's probably the first, on the north end of the lake, probably the first maybe 50 yards from shoreline all the way out is no deeper than 7 feet. And we were catching those big crappie on those. So just think in terms of that. So you got this medium diver here. You have Lucky Craft's version of it. This is actually called a square bill. And this dives to, I think it dives to 6 feet, 4 feet. This one dives to 4 feet. Okay, so that's staying up in the mid-range. And then you have a Mark Daniels Jr. version by Bill Lewis. And this one dives to 6 feet. Okay, I think that's what it says. This dives to 6 feet. Yep, 6 feet. Okay, the colors, I got color. These colors you could throw in clear to stained water. Clear to stained water. Okay, in any case. Here's what I say as a beginner. Find the bait that you find the most attractive visually to you. Don't really go on anyone else's opinion on, well, this works over here because of this clarity. Don't get into all that deep stuff yet. Learn how to throw a square bill. Learn how to throw medium or deeper diving crankbait. I don't want you to go more than 10 feet because once you get below 10 feet, you start to get into specialty fishing. And it doesn't matter what the species is. When you start fishing deep, you're fishing specialty. Sometimes people use special equipment. And sometimes there are special techniques. The goal here is to learn how to fish, and you will ruin your experience when you get into areas where a specialty fishing technique, design, lure, weight, or approach is much more advantageous to catching fish, and you don't know how to do that yet. because you haven't learned how to throw a square bill and make sure that it stays true when you run it 4 feet. You're going to catch some fish at 4 feet. Trust me. I don't care how cold that water is. People will, people will misrepresent all the time. There can be ice on water. If the fish wants to eat, that fish is going to eat at 4 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet. They're going to eat shallow, even in deep water. So don't spend much time getting into all of that deeper apparatus. Okay, the last one is the bottom of the water column, and this is when you get into your we'll call them your what kind of baits are these? What kind of baits? These are the rattle trap style baits. Okay, these are going to be your rattle trap style baits that you're going to get into, and lipless. That's the term I'm looking for. The lipless crankbait. Okay, where it's a weighted bait. It's going to dive. It flutters. It shimmies. And I have 3 styles here. I got one from Guggen's. That's a real pretty color, isn't it? Oh my goodness, that's a pretty color. We have the War Pig by Berkeley. This is one of Edwin Evers, a professional fisherman named Edwin Evers. He's a hammer in professional bass fishing, and he loves this. But look at how small that is. You're going to catch a lot of different kind of fish with that size bait. And then the old standby, if it's not the rattle trap itself as a lipless crankbait, it's going to be Strike King's Red Eye Shad. It's a great bait, great bait. These you're going to be fishing more toward the bottom, and there isn't you can cast it and burn it, or that is reel it in steady and fast. You can reel it steady and slow. You can bounce it off the ground like a worm. It's a very versatile bait. And so you'll be able to use your hard baits, your poppers, your mid-level divers, and your lipless crankbaits in order to attack the water column. So that's 3 categories that we've gotten past already. We got 2 more to go. Now, the next one is the worm. Now, I'm going to make another claim here. Here's my claim. The worm as a bait, as a general bait, has caught more fish for more people than any other bait in the history of fishing. Plain and simple. I am willing to challenge anyone on that. And the reason is because this plastic bait here, this soft bait, can mimic more types of forage, or it can inspire the anger and reaction of more type of fish than any other bait. We use this type of bait, this style of bait, to imitate everything. Like just think of the forage. That's what we use it to imitate. Minnows, crawdads, bugs, you name it. We have our crawbaits to be a little bit more specific, and sometimes they can mimic other fish and so forth, but these always mimic something else. Worms just don't happen to be a natural forage in the water for fish, but boy, do fish love them. That's not to say that worms don't end up in the water, because they do. But when you think of minnows, when you think of crawdads, when you think of water-type bugs, you're not thinking of worms as part of that ecology that becomes forage for a fish. But this, in particular, you better believe it. The lengths, either a 6, and I'm holding specific types up for a specific reason. The straight-tailed versus the curly-tail. I do not have a curly tail up here. And the reason why is this. The curly tail, as quiet as the secret is kept, the curly tail worm is a specialty bait. It is not a generic bait. Now, some people fish it like a generic bait, like a general bait, but it's a specialty bait because you have to make the bait do something. With this worm here, very little has to be done. You can swim it You can drop shot it. You can let it crawl on the ground because you're trying to get it to imitate something else. You can do all those things. You can fish it weedless or with an open hook. You can fish it with no weight or very heavy weight. You can fish it deep. You can fish it shallow. There is no season that excludes it. There is no time of day, whether day or night, that excludes it. There is no state, meaning of the 50 states and then the other territories. Wherever there is freshwater fishing, you can bring a plastic worm. And you have the straight tail. One of my favorites, once again, is that sexy shad robo worm right here. Then we have a bluegill flavor of the yum. These are Yumdingers. I like this kind. It's a 5-inch in an 8-pack, and they're very reasonably priced. This is a wacky style bait. It's one of those baits that literally all you have to do is put a hook in it. Now, I know when we first started throwing these, when, what's his name, Gary Yamamoto made the wacky worm, when he first came out with it, we had to hook it in the egg sac. And then someone got the bright idea, maybe I could Texas rig it or Carolina rig it. Then another person got an idea, well, maybe I can Nico rig it. And Nico rigging is to put a weight on one end and a hook near the weight and drop it that way with a long tail. Well, guess what? You can do it that way. You can put you can do it. Weightless is probably the most common, and you can just put a hook in there and let it fall. I personally like to put heavy or super line hooks in them, so I don't have to put a weight in it. And if I'm Nico rigging it, I'll let it drop by that weight right there. If I have to put a another weight like a nail weight or something in there, I will. But most of the time, I just super line hook it because those are some heavy hooks, and let that weight go straight down on it as well. And you don't have to twitch or pull. All you have to do is wait for your line to tighten and you reel that fish in. The other kind is a smaller kind. It's more of a what we call a Ned style bait. Is where you take basically a jig hook. Some people say a specialty jig hook. I just say a jig hook because you can just put it on a regular ball headed jig if you really wanted to do that. I personally like the mushroom head jigs from Berkeley. Because I don't like the idea of doing a 1/5, 1/6, 1/10 weight. You've heard me say that in past videos. I like 1/32, 1/16, 1/8, 3/16. You know, I like those weights. Quarters, halves. I'm familiar with those more than I am what ZMan brought us so many years ago. But having said that, these Ned style baits, again, they imitate so many different things, and if you just hook them up like jigs, like you do these curly tail jigs, and just let them bounce, you don't have to do a lot of weight, a lot of work, and you can get good fish. Now, last but not least, is probably the most fun among our baits here, and that's the swim bait. Now, I'm only bringing up one to talk about the category, but I will bring up other representations momentarily. And that is the Kitech. Now, I want to show you something. Rapala or Rapala, I don't know which one they want to call them, bought a company about 20 years ago called, let me see if I have that bait in here. And that company, that bait itself is an old bait. I think it's in here. Bought this company called Storm Lures, right here. Okay. Now I'm bringing this up just to show you. I thought I had a pack that is open. I wanted to show you that the paddle tail swim bait is not a new bait. I know I got one in here that's okay. Well, I guess I'll be tearing open a pack, because for some odd reason, I don't have one that's already open. And yep. So, I thought I did though. So, let me open up this pack here. This is called the Storm Lures bait here. And I used to kill them. This is a 1/8 ounce, and it's already made. And as you can see, it is a paddle tail swim bait. And it's about 2 inches, 3 inches. And I'm telling you, I can throw it today and I can wreck fish with it. That said, Kitech did not introduce the paddle tail swim bait to us. I just showed you one that's older than Kitech. The company's older than Kitech. But boy, did they put the taste in our mouth. Boy, did they bring a new recipe. Kitech brought it when they brought it. And because Kitech brought it, the private label Bass Pro Shops matched it. And Berkeley Power Bait did the same thing. And the Rage Swimmer did just the same, okay? Now, as popular as this one is, my preference is actually this one because of the length of this bait here. It's 2 3/4 inches, almost not yet 3 inches, which means that it is small enough to attract as many as many species of fish as I'm fishing for as the ones I've mentioned earlier in this video. But it is large enough to be seen by larger fish. You can catch 4, 5, 6 pound bass on baits this small and even smaller. I've caught big bass on crappie jigs of 2-inch curly tails, which is why I recommend it. So I recommend to you to get some swim baits, Kitech or Berkeley Power Bait or the Rage Swimmer or even some of the house brands. But get you some. If you want to start off with something, start off with Kitech because you'll start off with having a lot of fun. Now this is a 3.3 inch and this is just to show you I got the 3.3 inch size, I got the 3.5 inch size, but my favorite size is a 2 3/4 inch size. I throw this probably more than all the others. Now I mentioned to you earlier in here in the video that there was going to be one modification that I would suggest. If you're throwing the underspin, say you're throwing this 1/4 ounce underspin, and obviously you're going to need some sort of soft jig or a soft bait on this hook. I recommend that you do take one of these swim baits and either rig it upside down where the paddle tail comes up instead of down, or cut that paddle off altogether. And it'll be a fantastic trailer for this underspin. Repeat this video to repeat what I said. So there you have it. Those are the 5 categories. Now, my recommendation is that you pick, even in the subcategories, one of each. And then in the general categories, one of each. The worms have 2 subcategories, or 3 subcategories: the straight tail, the wacky style, and the net style. So you should make it within about $50 out of pocket expense. So if you get something that's 25% off, it's going to cost you in the mid-60s, and you get that discount, you can do it. There's a lot of deals out there, and then there's people are constantly discounting and clearing out because they get excess stock, or any number of things could happen. Things will get mislabeled, and they got to get rid of it because they're not selling exactly what was in the package. Take advantage of all of those opportunities and get the kind of baits that you need. Hopefully this was helpful to you as a beginner, and even some of you who are at the intermediate and even master levels who want to refer someone to a video that is as succinct as I hope this matured to be. And it helps us all. Number one, it helps us to remain frugal while at the same time enjoying America's 4th largest sport. Lastly, whatever you do, don't break your family's budget trying to buy any of this fish equipment, but do everything you can to break your personal best. I'll see you next time, and have a great time on the water.